In a world where people injure themselves doing simple things like tying their shoes or walking down the stairs, I'm going to tell you how I avoided a catastrophic injury at jiu-jitsu when I had the combined weight of my rolling partner and me on one leg and in a very vulnerable position.
Oh my god. Are you okay?
Don't get me wrong, this did hurt like crazy and compromised my ability to effectively use my right leg for about a week or so. But this could have been far, far worse. But before I really get into it, I wanted to start by saying that this situation was brought on by my choices and my choices alone. In other words, it's nobody's fault but mine. I would also like to shout out my jiu-jitsu gym, Defiant, in Woodbury, Minnesota, as well as my regular rolling partner, the rather large Majay, who happens to weigh over 300 pounds. But anyway, at the end of this video, you should have a better understanding of how to prevent injuries across your entire body. And no, I'm not suggesting that anyone attempt anything like what I did here, but if I can avoid my knee snapping in such a situation, I'd imagine the average person can avoid injuries from far less intense situations. And for this video, I will not only be focusing on the knee, but instead going over concepts that can be applied to the entire body, since, at the end of the day, our body is one unit. But first, some quick setup. I am a trainer who specializes in bodybuilding training, mobility training, and thus injury prevention. And I also happen to practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Prior to the incident, I had particularly sore adductor muscles, as I had been isolating those muscles a bit more than usual, since our gym had acquired an adduction machine. On top of that, I also had several consecutive days doing unusual activities thrown into my regular mix, such as a Ninja Warrior gym and a Silks class. Coming into Jiu-Jitsu the day of the incident, my right adductor region in particular was excessively sore. And not only that, but I decided to lift my rather massive training partner after he took my back, which, as you can imagine, is not a very common thing. But at least I got it on video, eh? In the brief moment where I adjusted my left leg, my right leg had to pick up the slack. And since that leg lacked stability from my adductors, the knee took a lot of what remained. This resulted in a gnarly bruise on my right adductors, as well as some swelling in the right knee. Again, not ideal, but it could have been so much worse. Before I get into the prevention piece, it's worth noting that I never iced any of the affected areas, as I believe that there are only rare instances where ice is necessary. I also continued to use the leg going forward after the incident, and was even doing deficit RDLs just a couple days later. Within a week, I was able to go to full knee flexion as well as stretch my adductors with minimal pain. Okay, so what did I do to prevent an all-around catastrophe? It's worth mentioning that I focused a lot of my training on bodybuilding and building strength in general. But as a part of that, I emphasize mobility and thus further injury prevention. I believe that mobility training is one of the greatest ways to manage and prevent injury. Mobility involves a combination of strength, stability, and flexibility. Mobility is movement in simplest terms, but movement through a full range of motion is most ideal for healthy joints, tendons, ligaments, and muscles. So with that, I typically train all of my exercises through their full range of motion. But I don't only perform traditional exercises like bench press, squat, and deadlift, as I do a lot of quote-unquote strange and vulnerable movements. Some of these are simply utilized as a part of warm-ups, while others are included in the working sets themselves. Examples would be Jefferson curls, handsome presses, and sissy squats. It is my opinion that the body can move in so many ways, and there's value in challenging as many of these ways as possible. For example, a knee valgus, which is essentially what my right knee did that day in jiu-jitsu. But outside of area-specific movements, I believe a great deal in doing movements that support the specific area. Using the knees as an example, we can look to a lot of the advice given by Ben Patrick, aka the knees over toes guy. Tibialis raises are a great way to strengthen the muscles right below the knee, and backwards walking is another simple strategy for protecting the knee. But in general, strengthening and mobilizing all the areas around the knee, including quads, hamstrings, adductors, abductors, calves, tibialis, and even the feet can reap big rewards. This might all sound a little too obvious from one point of view, but a kink in one part of the body can dramatically influence another part of the body, which I think is something that's not often considered. I mentioned warm-ups earlier, but it's worth bringing them up again. In my experience, it's very common for people to neglect their warm-ups in some way. But I believe that warm-ups are one of the most important parts of any workout. To assume that your body is ready to go out of the gate is a fool's assumption, if you ask me. Even if you don't hurt or injure yourself the majority of the time, it will catch up to you eventually. Spend some time opening up the major parts of your body prior to any sort of strenuous activity. For more info, I have a video dedicated to warm-ups. The last point to emphasize is short and sweet, but do your best to have consistent, solid nutrition, hydration, stress management, and rest. The collective of everything that I listed here will serve anyone well in their pursuit of consistent physical activity, even when it comes to preserving yourself in spite of the simplest little movements. Thank you so much for watching. Wishing you health and happiness. Bye-bye.